Welcome to ArtSpeak University, everybody. Today we've got Kirk sharing with us about understanding others. So this superpower we talk about quite a bit at ArtSpeak that we call empathy, and how valuable that is in both how we do our job with the deliverables and all the things so that we can deliver the right thing, but mostly because this is about people, how we interact with the people we're doing the job with and for. And again, I forgot to introduce myself, and I said I wouldn't do that. I'm Jared Toline. I'm an art director here with ArtSpeak, and I get to hop in and host with ArtSpeak University every so often, work with this amazing team. So, with that, take it away, Kirk.
Awesome. Thank you, Jared. And I'm Kirk with ArtSpeak, and I love getting to be part of this team and help working with organizations around the world. Communicate well with people. That's the goal. That's really what we do at ArtSpeak. But, sometimes that gets complicated. Sometimes communicating with people is harder than it seems like it would be. Because you know what? I'm a person, I'm a people. And you'd think that being a person that I would understand people, I'd be able to communicate with other people, like that would come rather naturally. But I find that actually people can be rather confusing sometimes. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that actually, me too. I'm sometimes confused myself. And so last week we talked about understanding ourselves, and this week we're talking about understanding those other people, confusing other people. Because, as Jared mentions, this is about people. That's our foundational core value. That's where we start at ArtSpeak, and in our perspective and philosophy on how we work and what we're doing here. Because people are amazing. People are amazing. I believe every single person is incredible. There's nearly 8 billion of them on the planet. And I think that's why we're here, why we're still here on the planet, to reach people, to help people, to bring good news, perhaps, in different forms, in different ways. But to do that, we're going to have to communicate. We're going to have to communicate with those people out there. We're going to have to communicate with some people around us that we want to work with alongside so that we can accomplish more than we ever can on our own. And so we're going to be looking at a tool that we use. This is a framework that we use to picture the challenge of communication, and we call it the communication triangle. Uh, and we use this in our branding projects, our messaging projects, our marketing projects, because in every communication context, on one side, there's a you, whether that's you as a person or you as a church or you as a business. And on the other side of that triangle, there's a them, whether that's your friend or a family member or the audience that you're trying to connect with or a certain demographic that you're trying to sell your business service to. There's a them. And you'll notice though that there's some other things going on in this triangle. There's a couple overlapping circles up here. That's what you want. Because when we're talking about this communication triangle, we're not talking about small talk. We're talking about a context in which you need to communicate with someone else because you want something to happen. You want something to change in some way. And so there's something that you want. There's something that they want. And and in between, that's where you have this overlap, and that's where you form a message. And you need to understand all of these pieces if you're going to communicate effectively. I'm going to highlight another thing here. You notice there's some gaps in these lines, and that's because there's something in between you and them. Uh, and we're going to get into all of that in a minute. In fact, that's a lot of what this talk is about. There's something in between you and the people that you work together with, the people on your team. Uh, we could expand that. Your family members, your friends. We could expand that to, in our context as an agency, we have clients, and those clients are our partners that we're working together to reach people. They're people too, and there is sometimes something. There's a gap between us and them. And so I studied intercultural communication. That was what a lot of my education was, intercultural communication. And here's the thing about intercultural communication. A lot of the trip ups that people find themselves in when trying to communicate across culture is assumptions. You have assumed that when you say a word or you talk about a thing, that the other person understands that the same way that you do, that they value that the same way that you do. You've made assumptions about the way that they think and the way that the world, the perspectives on how the world works. And that's where the trip ups happen. But I want to start today with a few assumptions that you can make. And we're going to start talking about understanding someone else. There's a lot you don't know. There's a few assumptions we can start with. All right. Number one, there are a few things that all people want. That's that circle, right? There's a few things that all people want. People want to be safe. They want to be connected and they want to be valued. Now, you might come up with a few other things that you think all people want, and that may be true. There may be a few things that don't fit in these categories, but I think the vast majority of those deep desires, when we're not talking about like pizza tonight, beyond pizza, I think people want these three things, and so we're going to keep coming back to that. But number two, all people were born. They started out as a baby, uh, and then a bunch of other stuff happened. We can go to that next slide. So you started out as a baby, and then a bunch of stuff happened. And the reality is, no matter who we're talking about, someone else, you are only ever going to understand and know about a tiny fraction of all of this that happened in their life. But all of that has come to form who they are today. And so all of those unknowns, all of the different ways that those forces, those tragedies, those successes, those good times and bad times and challenges, everything that made them over the last however many decades of their life has changed the way that they think, has changed the way that they perceive the world, has changed the way they perceive you, it's changed the way they understand all kinds of concepts. And those differences between their experiences and your experiences is a lot of the gap in between you and them. All right. So now let's dig in. Let's dig into that gap and start expanding on the different aspects of those things that you're going to have to understand in order to cross this gap so that you can work well with someone else, so that you can have relationships that grow and thrive, so that you can accomplish the big goals that you want to accomplish with your life, that you need other people for, so that you can feel safe and connected and valued. And so we're gonna dig into the gap, and then we're gonna look at some strategies for how you cross this gap with other people. So number one, we're going to start here. We're going to start with personality. We talked a bit about personality last week. We talked about understanding our own personality, and I think that is the place to start when you start talking about personality. By the way, is dive in on you, because the personality frameworks we talked about, different frameworks that are out there, DISC, Myers Briggs, Enneagram. Those are all tools for helping primarily you understand you. And but then there's also a benefit, I think, in understanding other personalities and how other personalities think and work and perceive. Because if we go to the next slide here, let's come back to this. Everybody wants to be safe, be connected, and be valued. And all of that history, all of that story, all of that tangled mess of someone's past experiences, the experiences that they had with their parents or caregivers, and the experiences, the ups and downs of life, the things that they were taught are just absorbed from their surroundings. That has formed two things. One, it defines what it means and looks like to be safe, what it means and looks like to be connected, and what it means and looks like to be valued. And those definitions, those meanings, are going to be different than yours. You had a different past experience. And it's going to, when you think about being connected, it's going to be a different picture in your mind than it is in theirs. Now, there are going to be similarities, there's going to be overlap, but you may find surprising differences on how other people define these things. It also defines different personal strategies on how you get there. And we're talking about the formation of your personality over time. These things that we now call personality, really, it's rooted in this set of your perspective on what it means to be safe, connected, and valued, and your strategies that you have learned on how you accomplish that. And those can look vastly different. And I think the value in understanding personality frameworks and reading up on this and learning about this, some of the value there is simply understanding how different personalities define those differently, how different it might be from you. And that's been some of the big aha moments for me as I've learned about personality and I realized, oh, I'm beginning to understand why someone else might approach this problem a different way than I did, or why they feel driven to do this where I felt driven to do it a different way. So we'll dig into that in a minute, but I want to give some disclaimers first because you guys asked some great questions last time about personality and how it's best done in a group context. And so let me give you a few do's and don'ts. So again, the value of a personality framework is number one, to understand your own perspective, your own motivation, your own strategies that you use to feel safe, connected, and valued. But it's going to give you, if you read about other personalities beyond your own, you're going to gain an understanding of just how different that might be and how that might look in someone else's mind. And it's going to give you a shared language. That if you approach this in a healthy way and you work with other people who are also using the same framework, now you're going to have a shorthand of how to talk about this with each other. But before I go on with that, uh, let me give you some don'ts first. Uh, don't label others. It's not for you to figure out what personality someone else is. And if you read about Enneagram will specifically tell you don't do this. That's not how this works. And I found that to be true because even the people that you think you know the best, you can flat out be wrong. I think I know my wife pretty well, but when I was reading through, I thought she was something different. Why? But you can be wrong because this is based on not necessarily behaviors, but on motivations underneath and the reasons why we're driven to certain things. It's also, you're going to be wrong because you're going to highlight in someone else certain differences that you perceive than you. And that's going to become outsized in your evaluation. So my caution there is just don't try to label someone else as a certain kind of personality. That needs to come from them. Number two, don't put people in a box. Uh, don't use a personality designation to say, well, you're going to be good at this and bad at that, and therefore, I would never consider putting you in this role or something like that. The truth is, and again, there's a lot of material out there on Enneagram. I've done a lot of reading on it, and it'll tell you that these different personalities, yeah, they might play out differently in different roles. There might be different strengths that come to bear, but these personalities are one. There's no good or bad personalities. Um, Again, this is a set of perceptions about the world and strategies that we've used to be safe, be connected, and be valued. And we can evaluate for ourselves as we work on ourselves. Is that strategy helpful for me right now, or has things changed? Do I need to adapt? Um, but it's not for us to work on other people and say, well, you need to change this. That's for them to decide. I want to say this: don't judge someone else's weakness through the lens of your strength. Don't judge someone else's weakness through the lens of your strength, because again, your personality, you have a perception of what it means to be valuable, what it means to have value in a social context, and a strategy for getting there. It's going to be different than other people's. And the temptation that I encourage you to fight here is say, well, this is valuable for me. This is how I prove my value. And I'm looking around and they're not good at that. And they're not good at that. And therefore, I have more value than them. You're evaluating their weakness through the lens of your strength. That's a common pitfall. All right. Some do's. Do work on yourself first. Well, and really, you can only work on yourself. So these personality frameworks to work on yourself. Identify again things that you may need to adjust and things that you may need to grow in, strategies you may need to change. Use this to broaden your understanding of how other personalities could work and different ways that they may be thinking about things that are different than you. And use this to appreciate, understand, and serve other people. Understand, appreciate, and serve other people. I'll give you some example. I mean, my wife and I have gone through Enneagram in depth, and once we both figured out and told each other, this is where my Enneagram number. This is why. This is how this plays out for me. That begins to give us a shared language. And so I'm a 5 on the Enneagram. My wife is a 2 on the Enneagram. And so we've discovered ways to use that understanding to help one another. As a 2, my wife knows that she tends to, one way that 2s, according to Enneagram, are protect themselves and find value for themselves is to serve everybody else, to try and go into everybody else's needs, everybody else's emotions, and try and serve everybody else to the neglect of themselves. And so one way that I can help my wife is by asking her, when I see that happening, I can ask her, hey, what do you need right now? So that she can remember, oh yeah, it's okay to look out for my own needs and take care of myself in the process here. And she looking at me, knowing that I'm a 5 and that, to recharge my social batteries, I need time by myself. And so she can look at me sometimes and like, do you need to go 5 right now? And what she means, that's just shorthand for I just need time to myself for a few hours to just be by myself and recharge my social batteries. And so that gives us some language. And, there's lots of other examples where this has helped us communicate with each other, understand how to work well with each other. One, and I'll give one more real quick. I don't make decisions quickly. And so my wife has learned to help me that when we need to make a scheduling decision, like we're looking at the calendar, she needs to know, hey, when is this going to happen? When can we put this on the calendar? But if she just asks me out of the blue and we're just standing around, I'm going to resist that because I'm like, I need all the data first. I can't make a decision about that. I need to see it all. And so she's learned to, instead of saying that, it's like, hey, we've had this decision to make. When can we sit down with a calendar, look at the details, and then make this plan? And that's how we get around one of the things that I know is a weakness of mine, and are able to work through that. In the workplace, this may play out in different ways. It may be for you, in your personality, one of your strategies for value, for protecting and making yourself valuable and making sure that you are valued, is to do something really well. Check all the boxes. all the details, make sure everything's in its place, double, triple checked. For someone else, their strategy for value is to get stuff done, crossing off to do items as fast as possible. Get it out the door. Boom, 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 boom. That's how I uh, make myself valuable here. And so you can understand that without understanding of how different people are perceiving that value and the purpose and what we're supposed to be doing here, there could be tension there. But if you understand that different perspective, well, now you have something to work with, to work together, to use the strengths of both to accomplish more better. All right. Uh, we're running out of time, so I want to keep going. Last week we talked about bucket. Uh, Other people have buckets too. And what I mean by bucket, got this diagram. Basically, you only have one bucket for your capacity to handle stress. And so there's no separate buckets for the stuff that's happening at home and the stuff that happens at work and the stuff that's just on the news. Like that all goes into your bucket. And the fuller that bucket is, the easier it is to spill out. The easier it is to have a reaction that maybe feels outsized to the situation, because you have these three different modes that your nervous system can operate in. Number one, you have your ventral mode. That's your engagement mode. That's when you have full access to your frontal lobe. You're engaging with other people. It's social interaction. That's generally ideal for solving the kinds of problems that we face in the world today. But when we're stressed, when our bucket's super full, we may find ourselves in mode number two, fight or flight, the sympathetic mode. And that's going to constrict those choices. We're going to feel like we have to be defensive or argue about something or just skip out. Or if you're really overwhelmed, you may just go straight to shutdown. You just stare at the screen and you just don't know what to say. You just want to go take a nap. But you need to understand that other people have these modes, and it's going to have a drastic effect on how they react to you in any given moment. And so, as you're trying to cross that gap, you need to be perceptive of your own nervous system state and their nervous system state, and understand how that's going to affect the interaction. All right, one more, real quick. History. Truth is, there's a history here. Maybe they have a history with you in particular, and that's going to affect this interaction. Whatever's in there, good, bad, indifferent, that's going to affect their perception of any communication that needs to happen. There's also their experiences with people like you. You may remind them of someone else that they have a different history with. That's going to affect their interaction with you. Or you may represent a category of a kind of person, and they have a perception of what it's like to interact with that kind of person. And that may affect how they react with you. All right. So, how do you cross the gap? How do you get from A to B here? How do you take in all of this and begin crossing this gap? Number one, it's empathetic honesty and confident humility. Empathetic honesty and confident humility. That's the solution. Because again, what do people want? They want to be safe. They want to be connected, and they want to be valued. And to get there, you're going to have to communicate cues of safety, invitation to connection, and you're going to have to express value. Um, Real quick, mind your own nervous system. You got to understand that if you're in fight and flight, you're going to inspire others to react in fight or flight. And if you're stressed out, that's going to show up in the interaction. It's going to add pressure. It's going to fill up buckets, and it's going to change the way that the interaction happens. Um, on the flip side, if you can give cues of safety, if you can come in with calm confidence, then you can take any situation, no matter how pressurized it might be, and bring it down. And people will feel more safe and more connected and more valued in that situation. I want to encourage you to replace assumptions with curiosity. Especially when things go wrong, we tend as humans to assume the worst intentions. I want you to replace that and assume, if you want a better outcome, assume the best. Start there. And then to fill in the real details, Listen. Listen first. Come in with questions. Help me understand. Come in with curiosity. Get their input, their values. The moment you start asking people for their input and their values, they feel valued, they feel heard, they feel connected, within that, then they feel safe. Empathetic honesty. Honesty is, in fact, a cue of safety. If people know that they're going to be told the truth, that truth matters here, and that I'm going to be told the truth, that's a cue of safety. I'm not going to have to guess at what's going on. We're going to be able to talk about it. And finally, express value. Here at our Speak, I think one of the easiest and best ways to do that is express gratitude to other people. Um, there's just such power in just saying thank you, and finding things to appreciate and value in other people that that meets that felt need, being safe, connected, and valued. And as you satisfy those things, all of a sudden now people can engage. You bring people out of fight or flight and into engagement, and now you can have great conversations. You can ask questions. You can learn whatever might be between you and them, so that you can cross the gap and you can paint the picture of a better future. You can make the win-win. Now, next week we're going to talk about conflict resolution. The week after that, we're going to talk about other kinds of win-win. This applies to so many situations in life. But ran through this material real fast. I think we have some questions here, and I want to get to them.
Awesome. Thank you, Kirk. That's just so good. So many things that you hear when you share like this that it's you're like, oh, well, that seems so simple, but I've never really processed it that way or thought about it like that too. And I know that sometimes when we're interacting with other people, we can when we're looking internally, we can think, why am I feeling this, or how am I feeling, and why am I feeling this way? And we can kind of start to ask that of other people. Why, how are they? But really, you kind of got to it there at the end. The only way we're going to be able to answer those questions for other people reliably is to listen to them and to ask, and to then just to sit back and start to empathize with them. So good. We've got a few questions here. If you guys have any more questions, you can drop them in now, maybe squeak them in real quick, or after, if you're watching this after the fact, or if you're here today and you still have some questions you want to ask, you can drop them in the community. But we got a couple here I want to get to. One, Andrew asked, what types of questions do you ask when you don't understand someone or what they're trying to say to you?
Yeah, two of my favorites, just in those conversations where I'm not understanding. Well, one, I need to communicate that I'm not,
Mm.
and so I
Yeah.
sometimes help me understand. That seems, I'm surprised by that. Help me understand where that came from. Help me understand what you mean. Um, and then the second is, tell me more.
Mm.
Um, if someone has said something, and again, I'm not understanding, or that's surprising to me, tell me more. Let's just keep that conversation going.
Yeah. Andrew's the one that asked this question. I know before talking with him, when he's trying to understand, he'll restate what he heard you say. What I'm hearing you
Yes.
say is
Yeah.
this, and that's a really good opportunity for the person you're talking to. He's like, oh well, no, we missed something or whatever. Identify a disconnect. That's great. Somebody else asked, do you have tangible practices to working well with others, especially others that have personalities that typically don't work well with your own personality?
Yeah, well, I would push back on the idea that there are certain personalities that don't work well with your personality.
Hmm.
Um, I think any personalities can work well together. You may have to learn some new things. You may have some conversations to understand. Hey, this is what I'm doing and why, and this is what I need in this situation. Um, and talk that out with another person. But I think any personalities, again, they have their strengths. There's beauty in that. I think you can work well with others.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think one, you set boundaries and express. You come in with questions like, "Hey, here was an interaction that didn't feel great to me, but help me understand why you said that or did that." And talk that out, get their perspective, and then share yours. The empathetic honesty. Say, "Hey, it would help me if this happened instead."
Hmm.
It would help me if we tried this.
Yeah, that's good. We got maybe one more here. um, how do you judge when you yourself may not be in a great place to be as empathetic as a conversation might require or interaction might require of you?
That's a great question. I, for myself, I use the gratitude practice. If I can't, um, for myself internally, find that I can express real gratitude for that person, I'm not there yet.
Hmm.
Um,
Oof.
and so, uh, and I can get there by being intentional about sitting down and like, okay, now let's get to gratitude, and let's make sure that I'm seeing that. Um, but I think that's just a great tool and indicator for me.
Hmm. That kind of goes back to something you said in what you're sharing about valuing others too. I feel like if you have to be in a place where you're placing value on others. Um, yeah. Okay. Um, and then let's do one more here, real quick, while we're still here. If you're not in an ideal emotional or mental space to be as empathetic as you need to, some healthy ways to navigate that, maybe with that person. So internally, maybe you need to work on your gratitude for them. But how do you let the person know that, like, I'm not in the space for this?
Yeah. The real problem here is that when we're in that state, we may not be thinking super clearly. I know that I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can, if you can say, "Hey, I need to come back to this conversation. I'm not ready to have this conversation right now," or to if sometimes there's a situation like this is the time for some reason, but you can like, also acknowledge, "Hey, this is where I'm at right
Mm-hmm.
now," and so if you can be upfront about that now, not every other person is going to understand that, and so Uh, but if there's any break that you can put, like you recognize you're not in the best state to have this conversation, if they're like, hey, I need to go get a drink of water and come back. Whatever pause you can give yourself there, so that you can take some deep breaths and maybe practice some gratitude before
Yeah.
you come back, to try and bring yourself a few notches in the right direction. That can go a long ways.
Yeah. Great. Awesome, man. I'd love to keep talking about this with you, but looking forward to next week too, where you're saying, what was it? Next week you said is,
Next week, okay, we're going to take what been talking about and now specifically talk about conflict resolution.
yeah, okay. Yeah, conflict resolution. Awesome. Well, great. Thank you everybody for joining us for today's Art Speak University. And remember, if you do have any more questions or just want to keep the conversation going, you can do that in the comment section in the community or in the Slack community as well. We have the channel for Art Speak University. Lots of other great channels with awesome stuff happening in there, awesome conversations and great stuff. So, yeah, hop in there and we'll see y'all in the channels and around. Thanks, Kurt.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.